I am Melissa Thompson, 32 years old, and last month my existence fractured at a family meal in Seattle. The residence my beloved grandparents bequeathed me became a conflict zone for my privileged sister and my acquiescent parents. They had constantly indulged her with every desire while I managed independently. That night, she slapped me across the face, shoved me toward the door with brutal force and snarled, "Get out of my house." My parents just sat there, their eyes cold and unmoving, as I stumbled out into the yard, my arm bruised and my heart pounding. I stood under the streetlight, staring at the locked door, my breath visible in the chilly air. A week later, a package landed on their doorstep. My mother blew up my phone with 45 missed calls, her voice frantically pleading. It was all a mistake. I texted back 3 words, "Get out now." Before coming to my story, I want to know what time you're listening and what city you're in. I am happy to know how far my story spreads. A week earlier, I sat at my apartment's dining table in Seattle, arranging plates for a family dinner I hoped would mend old wounds. I'd spent hours cooking lasagna from Grandma Dorothy's recipe, the smell of garlic and tomato filling my small space. My sister, 3 years older, arrived late with my parents, her eyes scanning my modest home with a familiar sneer. My mother, Patricia Thompson, handed me a store-bought dessert muttering about traffic. My father, Robert Thompson, barely nodded, already asking for a beer. I forced a smile, setting out appetizers, determined to keep things civil. Conversations started light work, whether my parents' book club. Amanda Thompson, my sister, lounged in a chair, scrolling her phone, barely joining in. I mentioned my latest coding project, a budgeting app I'd pitched at work. Patricia waved it off, saying, "That's nice, Melissa, but let's hear about Amanda's new venture." Amanda launched into a story about her struggling startup, a fitness app that hadn't landed funding. "Investors don't get my vision," she complained, tossing her hair. Robert nodded sympathetically. "You'll find the right one, sweetheart." I bit my lip, used to their favoritism. The atmosphere altered when Patricia brought up the house my grandparents, Dorothy Wilson and Harold Wilson, left me. "Have you updated the kitchen yet?" She asked, her tone too casual. Amanda was saying it would be perfect for her. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "It's my house," I said evenly. Amanda leaned forward, her voice sharp. "You don't need all that space, Melissa. I'm starting over after my app tanked." "It'd be better with me." My chest tightened. Grandma and Grandpa left it to me, not you. Robert cleared his throat. "It's a family house. Think about sharing, Melissa." Patricia chimed in, "Amanda's in a tough spot." "You're doing fine." I pushed back, voice steady despite my rising anger. "Fine. I've worked for everything while you've handed Amanda whatever she wanted." Amanda's face darkened. "Don't act superior just because you code apps nobody uses." The insult stung, but I held my ground. "At least, I don't expect handouts." The table went silent. Then Amanda stood, her chair scraping the floor. "You're so selfish," she spat, stepping closer. Before I could react, her hand cracked across my cheek. The sting, sharp and hot. She grabbed my arm, shoving me toward the door. "Get out of my house," she yelled, as if my apartment were hers. I stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold, and fell onto the grass, outside, my arms scraping the pavement. Patricia and Robert sat frozen. Their face is blank, not a word of protest. I pulled myself up, tasting blood from my lip, and glared at the shut door. Something snapped inside me. "Game over," I whispered to myself, brushing dirt off my sleeve. I drove to a nearby coffee shop, my hands shaking on the wheel. My phone lit up with a text from my colleague, Rebecca Hayes. "You okay? Call me." I dialed her number, my voice low as I recounted the fight. "They want the house, Rebecca. They think it's theirs." Her response was firm. "You need to protect what's yours, Melissa. Start digging." That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop, pulling up the house's deed and Grandma Dorothy's will. I wasn't giving up without a fight. The next morning, I sat at my desk, the sting of Amanda's slap still fresh on my cheek. My laptop glowed with the deed to the house Grandma Dorothy Wilson and Grandpa Harold Wilson left me. Their words from the will echoed in my mind. "Melissa, you showed us true love. I wasn't letting my sister or parents take that away." I opened a browser, pulling up property records for our Seattle neighborhood. The house valued at $200,000 when I inherited it 3 years ago. now sat at nearly $1 million. The tech boom had transformed our street into a hot market. My hands steadied as I realized the power I held. I dialed Rebecca Hayes, my colleague and closest confidant, her voice sharp over the phone. "Melissa, you need to lock this down. They're banking on you caving." She suggested a lawyer she knew, a property expert named Karen Walsh. I called Karen explaining the situation. "My sisters demand my parents silence the house." "Send me the will indeed," Karen said briskly. "Washington law is clear on inheritance." "Let's see what we're working with." By noon, I emailed her the documents, my fingers trembling not from fear but from purpose. Karen called back that afternoon. "Good news," she said. "The will is airtight, signed with 3 witnesses and a doctor's note confirming your grandparents' mental clarity. Your parents and sister have been living there without permission, technically squatting." I leaned back, stunned. Squatting. Amanda had been crashing in the guest room, claiming it as her office for her failing fitness app. Patricia and Robert stayed over, often acting like the house was theirs. Karen continued. "You can issue an eviction note 72 hours under state law or sell it outright. Your call." I dug deeper, pulling up old emails from Patricia. Months ago, she'd asked about the house's wiring, claiming Amanda needed stable internet for her startup. Robert had texted about the garage, saying it'd be perfect for Amanda's equipment. It hit me that they'd been planning this for months, assuming I'd roll over. I remembered Grandma Dorothy's voice, calm but firm, one evening when I was 16. We'd sat in her garden debugging code on her ancient desktop. "You're tougher than they think, Melissa," she'd said, her hand steady on the keyboard. "Don't let their noise drown you out." Grandpa Harold had nodded, tweaking a circuit board. "Build your own path, kid." Rebecca met me for coffee that evening at a shop near Pike Place Market. "This is your moment," she said, stirring her latte. "They've taken enough of your college fund, your time, your peace. Demand what's yours." I nodded, my resolve hardening. Back home, I spread out the documents, the will deed, and a market analysis I'd run through my real estate app. The numbers were clear, selling the house to a young family. The Carters' $850,000 was locked in papers signed last week. I hadn't told my family, knowing they'd fight it. I drafted a plan with Karen. We'd send a package to the house, certified copies of the will, the sale contract, and an eviction notice. The Carters, a couple with 2 kids, loved the garden and the smart home system I'd coded. They'd move in next month. I pictured Amanda's smug face when she opened that package, Patricia's panic, Robert's silence crumbling. For 30 years, I'd been the one to compromise, to step aside. Not this time. Sitting with those documents, my mind drifted to the years of being overlooked in our Seattle home. Growing up, my grandparents, Dorothy Wilson and Harold Wilson, were my anchor. Their cozy house with its creaky porch and blooming garden was where I felt valued. They'd sit me at their old PC, teaching me to code simple games, their patience endless. "You've got a spark." Melissa, Grandma Dorothy would say, her eyes bright. Grandpa Harold would chuckle, tweaking a motherboard. "Keep building, kid. You'll outshine them all." Meanwhile, my parents, Patricia Thompson and Robert Thompson, poured everything into my sister Amanda Thompson, 3 years older. When I was 15, I needed a laptop for a coding camp. Patricia said, "We're tight on funds." A week later, Amanda got a brand new MacBook for her startup ideas. I worked weekends at a coffee shop to buy a used Dell. Its keys sticking from overuse. At 16, Amanda got a shiny SUV for her birthday, while I rode the city bus, my backpack heavy with library books. "Amanda has big dreams," Robert would say, shrugging off my straight A report cards. "You're fine, Melissa." Fine. That word burned. My college fund was another casualty. At 18, I learned it had vanished into Amanda's first app venture, a social media platform that crashed in 4 months. "Unexpected expenses," Patricia mumbled when I asked. I worked 30 hours a week through college coding freelance apps to cover tuition, still pulling a 3.8 GPA in computer science. Amanda dropped out of 2 universities each time with my parents' excuses and cash for her next vision. I'd call Grandma Dorothy, voice shaky, venting about the unfairness. "They're blind to your worth," she'd say, her voice steady over tea in her kitchen. "But you're stronger than their mistakes." One night when I was 17, I sat on their porch, tears streaming after Patricia cancelled my science fair trip to fund Amanda's coding boot camp. Grandpa Harold handed me a soldering iron. Fix what's broken, Melissa, starting with yourself. Their belief kept me going. When they passed 3 years ago, their will left me the house with a letter and Dorothy's neat handwriting. Melissa, you gave us love when others only took. This house is yours to protect. Amanda scoffed at the reading, tossing her hair. Good luck with that fixer-upper. I poured my savings into the house, coding a smart system to control lights and security, preserving the garden Dorothy loved. Amanda, meanwhile, racked up debt on her fitness app, always expecting a bailout. Patricia and Robert never questioned her, their praise endless. Amanda's a risk taker, they'd say, ignoring my late-night coding sessions to meet work deadlines. I'd overhear them at holiday dinners, whispering about giving Amanda the house for stability. Stability, as if I hadn't earned it. The final straw was a memory from 2 years ago. I'd found an old photo of me and Dorothy in the garden, her arm around me, both of us smiling. Tucked behind it was another note from her, Melissa. You're the one who carries our love forward. Don't let them steal your fire. That note, now in my desk drawer, fueled my anger as I sat with the deed. For 30 years I'd been pushed aside. My efforts dismissed, my inheritance targeted. Amanda's slap wasn't just physical, it was the culmination of their entitlement. I wasn't just protecting a house, I was reclaiming my worth. Back at my apartment, I finalized the plan with Karen. The house sailed to the coders. A young couple with 2 kids was locked in at $850,000, paper signed and notarized. Karen had prepared a package, certified copies of Grandma Dorothy's will, the sale contract, and a 72-hour eviction notice under Washington law. This will hit them hard, she said over the phone, her voice calm but firm. They've been squatting illegally. You're within your rights. I nodded, picturing Amanda's smug grin fading. I overnighted the package to the house, my hand steady as I handed it to the courier. The next day, I left Seattle for a work conference in Portland, needing distance. My phone stayed on silent, but I knew the storm was coming. Rebecca texted, package delivered. Brace yourself. By evening, my voicemail was flooded. Patricia's first message was shaky. Melissa, what's this about a sale? Call me now. Amanda's was pure venom. You're not getting away with this. Robert left a single gruff message. We need to talk. I ignored them all, focusing on my conference keynote, a pitch for my budgeting app. It felt like a small rebellion, prioritizing my work over their chaos. 2 days later, Karen called, with an update. They opened the package, she said. Your mother's been calling my office non-stop, claiming it's a mistake. Amanda's hired a lawyer, some guy named Paul Grayson. I smirked, knowing the will's strength, 3 witnesses. A doctor's note, untouchable after 3 years under Washington's statute of limitations. Let them try, I told Karen. What's next? She explained the eviction process. The Carters would take possession in 3 weeks, and the sheriff could enforce the notice if my family resisted. They're panicking, she added. Amanda's screaming about her rights to the house. I pictured the scene at the house. Amanda pacing the living room she'd claimed as her office, ripping open the package to find the sale contract. Patricia clutching the will, her face pale as she read Dorothy's words, naming me sole heir. Robert, silent, is always staring at the eviction notice. They'd assumed I'd hand over the house like I'd handed over my college fund. My time. My dignity. But I'd learned from Dorothy's quiet strength, her lessons in standing firm. You don't know them anything, she told me once, her hand squeezing mine as we debugged code together. Amanda's lawyer called me that afternoon, his tone slick. My client believes there's been a misunderstanding, Paul said. The house is a family asset. I cut him off. The will says it's mine. Check the records. He stammered, mentioning a possible contest. You're 3 years too late, I said, my voice cold. The sale's binding. Tell Amanda to pack. Karen confirmed later that Paul backed off, admitting the case was dead on arrival. Washington law didn't bend for entitled siblings. I stayed in Portland another day, letting my family stew. Rebecca sent updates. Amanda had posted a rant on social media, calling me a traitor. Patricia tried rallying cousins, claiming I'd stolen their legacy. I didn't respond. The Carters, unaware of the drama, emailed me a thank you note gushing about the garden and the smart system I'd coded. Our kids can't wait to move in, they wrote. I smiled, knowing Dorothy and Harold would have loved their excitement. Back in Seattle, I met Rebecca at a diner near my office. "They're falling apart," she said, sipping coffee. Amanda's lawyer dropped her. "Your parents are begging for a meeting." I shook my head. "No meetings?" They made their choice. I'd spent decades swallowing their demands, but the eviction notice was my line in the sand. Amanda slapped their silence. "It all led here. I wasn't just selling a house. I was breaking free." 3 days after the package arrived, the fallout began. Amanda's lawyer, Paul Grayson, sent a final email admitting defeat. Washington's 3-year statute of limitations on will contest had expired, and the no-dries documents were ironclad. The coders, the new buyers, were set to move into the house in 18 days. Amanda, Patricia, and Robert had 72 hours to vacate, or the sheriff would step in. Karen called me at my Portland hotel, her voice steady. "They're out of moves, Melissa. The house is legally gone." I leaned back, a quiet satisfaction settling in. For once, their entitlement had no leverage. Back in Seattle, Amanda's world unraveled. Her fitness app startup, already struggling with missed loan payments, collapsed when creditors caught wind of her unstable housing. The bank seized her assets under Washington's lien laws, leaving her with nothing but a leased car and a pile of debt. She posted a desperate plea on social media, framing herself as a victim of my greed. Cousins and aunts flooded my inbox with accusations, parroting her story. I forwarded them the will and sale contract, letting Grandma Dorothy's words speak for themselves. Most went silent, their support for Amanda fading as the truth spread. Patricia and Robert faced their own reckoning. To cover Amanda's startup loans, they'd refinanced their own home 2 years ago, a risky move in Seattle's volatile market. With the house gone and no bailout from me, they couldn't keep up with payments. They filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, a public record that hit the local news. Their suburban home, once a status symbol, was foreclosed. They moved into a cramped rental apartment downtown. Their social circle, shrinking as friends, distanced themselves from the scandal. Patricia's book club stopped inviting her. Robert's golf buddies cancelled their outings. I watched from afar back at my Seattle apartment. Rebecca met me for lunch at a cafe near Lake Union, her eyes wide as she scrolled through the latest headlines. "Amanda's posting about moving into a motel," she said, shaking her head. "Your parents' foreclosure is all over the neighborhood forum." I sipped my coffee, feeling no guilt. For 32 years, they'd taken from me my college fund, my opportunities, my peace. Now their choices had built their own cage. Grandma Dorothy's voice echoed in my mind from a night we'd coded a light sensor for her garden. "Actions have consequences, Melissa," she'd said, wiring a circuit. "Yours and theirs." Amanda tried calling once, her voice cracking through a voicemail. "You've ruined me, Melissa." "Where am I supposed to go?" I didn't reply. She'd made her bed when she raised her hand against me when she demanded what wasn't hers. Patricia sent text begging for a meeting to fix this. I blocked her number. Robert left a message, his tone flat. "You've gone too far." I deleted it without a second thought. Their attempts to guilt me felt hollow, a last gasp of control slipping away. The local paper ran a story on the house sale, mentioning the family dispute without my name. Neighbours who'd seen me tend Dorothy's garden for years sent supportive emails. "Your grandparents would be proud," one wrote. The Cotters sent photos of their kids playing in the yard, the roses blooming under their care. I smiled, knowing the house was alive with new memories, just as Dorothy and Harold wanted. Rebecca and I toasted at the cafe, clinking glasses of iced tea. "You flipped the script," she said, grinning. "They thought they'd break you." I nodded my chest light. The dominoes had fallen not because I pushed, but because they'd built a house of cards. Amanda's slapped their silence. They're greeted or led here. I wasn't reveling in their pain, but I wasn't carrying it either. For the first time, I felt untethered. 2 months later, I stood in my new bungalow in Seattle's sunlight, streaming through the windows. The small house tucked in an up-and-coming neighborhood was half the size of Grandma Dorothy's, but perfect for me. I'd painted the walls a soft grey, hung a photo of Dorothy and Harold in the garden, and planted rose cuttings from their old yard. With the $850,000 from the house sale, I'd invested in my dream. An education app teaching kids to code, partnering with Rebecca Hayes. I launched it last month and early downloads were climbing fast. My new life felt like a clean slate. I'd cut all ties with my family. Amanda Thompson, my sister, had spiraled further after losing her startup. With her assets seized, she couldn't afford her leased car or motel rent. Last I heard, she was working part-time at a coffee shop, living in a shared apartment with strangers, her social media silent. Seattle's tough job market offered no mercy for her lack of experience. Patricia Thompson and Robert Thompson, my parents, were hit harder. Their Chapter 7 bankruptcy stripped them of their suburban home, forcing them into a tiny rental near the city's edge. Their social standing crumbled. Patricia's book club dropped her, and Robert's former colleagues avoided him. A local blog mentioned their foreclosure, tying it to family mismanagement. They'd become pariahs in their own circle. I didn't gloat, but I didn't grieve either. Their choices favoring Amanda, ignoring me, demanding my inheritance, had built this outcome. Grandma Dorothy's lessons rang clear. Your worth isn't their approval, she'd said, showing me how to debug code under her porch light. Harold's gruff advice, stand tall, Kid echoed as I built my app. Their love, not my family's, was my foundation. I blocked Patricia's last text, a plea to talk it out. Amanda's final voicemail accusing me of betrayal went straight to trash. Robert hadn't reached out since the eviction notice landed. My app's success grew. A Seattle tech conference invited me to speak, and I shared the stage with coders I'd admired for years. Rebecca cheered from the front row, her grin wide as I demoed the app's features. You're killing it, she said later over drinks at a downtown bar. Dorothy would be proud. I nodded, thinking of the nights I'd coded with her, her steady voice guiding me. The app wasn't just a job. It was my way of passing on her belief in building something meaningful. One evening, I drove past the old house. The coders had settled in their kids' bikes, leaning against the fence, roses blooming brighter than ever. A new sign hung by the gate naming the garden after Dorothy. I didn't stop, just slowed enough to take it in. The residence was no longer mine, however its essence endured.